This podcast is brought to you by the Ultimate Lettering Quiz. Find out just how much you really know about letters by taking the quiz for free on martinaflor.com/quiz. Enjoy. Uno, dos, tres.
Letter now.
Welcome everybody to Letter Now, a podcast where we nurture the hand lettering masters of tomorrow, today. My name is Martina Flor. I'm a lettering artist, author, educator, and the host of this show. And today I have an amazing guest to talk about freelancing, the good, the bad, and the ugly. How do you keep from burnout if you love what you do? What are the great things about freelancing, and what are not what are the not so great things about it? And to discuss this, I have invited designer, illustrator, and type designer Scott Biersack, based in Phoenix, Arizona. So hi, Scott. Thank you for coming to the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Scott, I always ask my guests to introduce themselves and their work. So how will you introduce yourself and what you do?
I'm a full-time freelance lettering artist, illustrator, designer, but mostly focus within like everything typography.
Amazing. So I'm going to add Scott's website to the show notes in case you don't know his work yet. And I'm so excited to be talking to you today because I feel that you have a unique identity as a designer, and I think I told you this when I first invited you to the podcast. If you go to Scott's website, his artist statement is "No work, just play," and that reflects in all aspects of what he does, and not only his creative work for clients, but also in the way he speaks, like in the way he communicates, in the copy of his website, his approach to creativity. And with this, I mean that I really want to later on listen to all the latest creative explorations you have been doing outside of typography. And also through his TikTok account, he periodically creates videos around the life of a freelancer that are hilarious. So we have an audio of one of them, right? Can we play that?
Do you love not being able to buy your groceries? How about missing your electricity bill?
Jesus Christ.
Well, then getting paid in exposure is a thing for you. The magical, absolutely nonsensical currency that takes care of nothing. Wow, getting paid fairly for my craft was completely insane. Now that I'm getting paid in exposure, I live with my parents and I can't afford a single thing. Watch as your exposure brings you absolutely fucking nothing at all. Thanks, exposure.
I freaking love this. By the way, you can go check the rest of this TikTok video series on Scott's TikTok account at You Bring Fire. I will add this to the show notes as well. So when I discovered the first one, I couldn't stop watching, and I went on the next one and the next one. So I think you will be hooked too. And that leads me back to you, Scott. And I want to kick off the conversation by asking you what motivated you to do these videos? Because what I find genius about them is that it turns frustrating things that we experience as freelancers into something that is very fun, and at times it's even empowering. And I personally find it like really therapeutic. You say in English, like therapeutic, I guess. Therapeutic. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. It's so weird to, of course, sit in front of all of you guys and watch my own videos. It's such a strange feeling and thing to do. But I think it kind of started because at the start of the year, we're all going through this pandemic, and I needed some way to sort of like change up my routine in a way. So I told myself that I would post a new video on TikTok every day for an entire year. And that is a insane thing to do. And I thought, I can do this, no problem, because I did a Project 365 when I first started like my lettering career back in the day. And I posted a new piece of work on Instagram every single day for a year. And that's kind of what projected and propelled my career to what it is now. So I thought I would do the same thing with TikTok. Well, little did I know, it's so much more work to like create content for TikTok. So I ended up stopping this project. Like I did it for 2.5 or 3 months, and then I was like, I can't keep doing this. But the sort of like comedic aspect that I try to approach in like my TikTok videos definitely was inspired by many frustrations that have occurred in my freelance career and just day-to-day life. And it was, yeah, like you said, a kind of a therapeutic way of me sort of like getting it off my chest and working through these like frustrations in a way that was fun and ideally engaging. So I had a good time making them, but again, it's so weird to watch myself watch them again.
No, and I think that's such a good approach. And I think that's why I was so driven to these videos, because I feel that, I can totally resonate with the topics you touch on these videos. And I feel that at times as designers or freelancers or artists, we put ourselves in this position of being victims and like victimizing ourselves because we experience this stuff. And I bet that there's other disciplines out there that experience the same things or have the same or similar stories to tell, right? And I feel that by you turning them into, kind of creating a parody around them, you sort of take the weight out of these things. These are things that we experience and we need to live with, but it's not all. It's not everything that happens in our businesses and our lives as freelancers. And I found that really like a new approach to looking at these issues. So we will speak today about different aspects of freelancing. And today is a special day because we are recording this episode during a live business retreat that I'm hosting for members of my coaching program for creatives called Lim Now. So besides answering some of the questions that I have collected on social media, we'll be opening the mic for all of you in the room to ask questions. So the good thing, Scott, about this room is that we are all freelancers or solopreneurs, and I bet that you, as everyone here in the room, couldn't imagine our life in any other way. So this conversation will really circle around what's not so great about freelancing, but also about the things that we really enjoy around freelancing. And Scott, this is a listener-driven show, so we are gonna start by answering questions from our listeners. So we'll start with the some messages coming from social media. For our listeners, you can send us voice memos with questions and comments by simply going to martinaflor.com/voice message or email your voice memo to podcast@martinaflor.com. So today we have a question coming in from Josh on Instagram. How do you keep from burnout if your hobby, doing something you love, becomes your full-time gig? This is such a great question to get started because most of us that have started or are starting a business in the creative industries are here most probably because we enjoy doing what we do, right? We had that first spark where we discovered that illustration was our thing, or we found out that we were really good at lettering. And, personally, when I started doing lettering, I thought, okay, I feel I have a talent for this. And on top of that, I enjoy it. So because you enjoy it, you want to do more of that. And a way of doing more of that is to turn it into your full-time job, right? Which is great. I'm all for it. I think it's a great way of approaching life and a business. But I feel that in the world of art, we go above and beyond. And with the fact that we love what we do, we tend to also push the limits of our well-being. So we neglect our main creative tool, which is our bodies and our minds. So there's a very strong tendency to overwork and to do more more of what we actually need to do, right? And I want to pass it on to you, Scott, and see what would you say, Josh, that is wondering, hey, I love what I do, and I want to turn it into my full-time gig, but how do I keep the balance? How do I keep myself from not being burned out?
Yeah, this is a question I get asked pretty frequently, and I think the answer kind of varies depending on who you are as a person and kind of like what you enjoy. So my experience is I've hit burnout a number of times, and this is early on in my career for sure, solely because you are in this mindset of like, okay, I know exactly what I'm trying to achieve with my lettering, illustration, whatever your sort of like career focus is. And you know what you're trying to achieve, and you're trying to achieve it ideally in a faster period of time than what is, quote unquote, normal. And that's exactly what I did. I was trying to reach like Jessica Hish and Eric Murnovich level when, I had like a year of experience, and I was like, oh, I'll reach this point in like 2 years. But like in reality, it takes, you got to put in your 10,000 hours type of thing. So I know the burnout can easily happen in that sense because you're trying to cram, 10 years worth of experience into a short, 1 or 2 year time period. And it's just not possible, like you got to take the time to, whether that's like go through some educational program or workshop or whatever, and put in the time and the practice to like get to that point. You can obviously get to that point quicker than others if you're very gifted in the matter, of course, but not everyone is gifted. It takes the time and dedication to get to that point. So to avoid burnout, my personal advice and experiences have been to, of course, take a step away from the work. Like creatives as a whole need that like sort of solitude and alone time to sort of like recharge our batteries in a way. Because otherwise, you're going to hit that point where you're like feeling frustrated or depressed or, just kind of having a difficult time, expressing certain ideas or whatever that situation may be. It varies depending on the person. So for me, like what I would personally do is go for a bike ride or a run or do some meditation or journaling, a lot of self-reflecting stuff, because that's kind of what creatives are. We're kind of in that world to begin with. But everyone's sort of like idea of, relaxation is, or, some way for you to sort of disconnect from everything. It's going to be completely different. So like my idea of that in avoiding burnout is completely different from somebody else's idea of avoiding burnout. So don't like take this with a grain of salt. Like this is not like the tried and true way, but you do need that time to sort of rest and recharge. And I know it's like super fun and enjoyable to like do what you love, but you still need that like recharge time.
Yeah, and I think that also, the question that Josh was doing has already like the answer embedded in it, because once you turn your hobby into your job, then you need to start setting some boundaries to your job now, like, right? You need to start treating your hobby like a job and kind of taking breaks and allowing some space for your personal life and to recharge, as you said. And with this, I want to go on to a follow-up question, which is, I know that recently you have been exploring other things outside your expertise, right? And I really want you to tell us the experience of like going outside of that thing that used to be a hobby for you, and now it turned into your full-time gig. And how did you decide to explore other creative disciplines like ceramics, I believe, and other things? So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, kind of alluding to what we were previously talking about with burnout, I hit burnout so many times that, sometimes you're in the burnout stage and you don't even realize it. And that is the worst, because you're kind of just like in this cloudy, foggy mess of a day-to-day life. And I was kind of experiencing that for, honestly, 2 to 3 years. I was just feeling kind of like I was clocking in and clocking out every day. Even though I was enjoying what I was doing, I was still kind of like, what's the point of all this? You know, I was questioning a lot of like my self-worth essentially. And like what the meaning of life is, and like kind of some deep stuff. And I got to this point where I somehow like got out of this burnout stage, if you will, and like all of a sudden it was like a flip of a light switch. My creativity or expression thereof sort of like exploded, and I was like, I got to do this and I got to do this, and I was trying to explore all these things that have interested me for the longest time, but I just kept putting them off just solely because of how I would be so invested with lettering and type design and all that stuff. But thankfully this creativity was like flowing, and I knew I needed to latch onto it while I could, because as we all know, like that's a very finite thing and it doesn't really last that long. So I was really worried about how long it would last. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna just go for it. And that's kind of how ceramics started. I've always wanted to attempt, making my own pots and bowls and cups and stuff. And, I just told myself like, fuck it, let's go for it. And I've been enjoying the process along the way. And simultaneously, I've also been very interested in creating my own music. I know nothing about music, never played an instrument. I know nothing of this world. So, again, I was very interested in like, okay, this is something that interests me. Life's too short. I got to at least attempt it. So I'm now enrolled in the Berklee College of Music because when I get invested in something, I pretty much go like full force into these things. But also simultaneously, I do love it to that degree of like, willing to go to school for it, of course. So doing these two things in particular, it sort of allowed me to realize that, as creatives, we are creatives first and foremost. And it's not so much you are an artist or you are a lettering artist and type designer, but you are a creative overall because you are creating for the sake of creating, right? So through this experience, I realized this, and I realized that my career isn't necessarily like lettering artist until the day I die. It's more of like what I've been describing as a spider web. So, I'm doing a little bit of lettering over here, ceramics, copywriting, video stuff, film work stuff. I'm trying to do a little bit of everything, as long as I'm expressing myself and creating for the sake of creating, and of course, enjoying the process along the way.
I love that, because that picture of your life as a creative is much more organic and much more opportunity oriented, like knowing that I love being a creative, but it could take different forms depending on the time, and you don't need to marry it to something from day one, and kind of be open to whatever comes to you down the road, right? And I think that oftentimes, especially for freelancers, that many of us are, for a good reason, but we niche down to something, or we develop an expertise. Sometimes our expertise, which is what can make us stand out in the crowd, is also limiting us, right? So it becomes kind of our like the thing we have to live for and by. And there's so many aspects to the life of a creative, right? You can be really skilled at doing something, but also have other interests. And I know that I personally bought into this. I know that, in the beginning of my career, like sort of laser focusing on lettering and really putting, as you said, like the time and hours of work really like made me feel that I had a skill and I could develop that to a certain level, but also sort of created an identity for myself, right? But then later on, I started realizing like, hey, I have, there's other aspects to what I am, right? and perhaps I can start exploring them, and without thinking whether the people will think like, well, but you're a lettering artist, you shouldn't be recording a podcast, right? Or you're a lettering artist, you shouldn't be like, I don't know, doing ceramics or something like this, right? So I think there's so many interesting things of what you said, and this idea of the spider web of creativity. Can you explain how do you feel that has an impact on your work, on your daily life, this idea of the spider web?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't put too much thought into it, but I guess the ultimate thinking is your career is not a linear point A to point B sort of process, at least in my opinion. Especially as freelancers, you kind of touched on this. We're sort of like very able and nimble to accept random projects and opportunities that happen solely because we have the capabilities to pivot in certain ways. And that's kind of what I mean by this sort of spider web, is like, I'm realizing that you can kind of pivot in all these different directions. And let's say, for me, I'm exploring music and ceramics, but that can then influence my lettering, or vice versa. Like, I might take my lettering and put it on my ceramics, and it might allow my ceramic pieces to be that much more, unique. So, as a creative, I think it's great to explore all kinds of things, because you're going to be influenced by all of those things, and they're all like working together in a way. So I know it's easier said than done, of course. Like, I don't think everyone can get to that point where they're exploring all these different things, because it is so creatively draining. So I know, again, just, talking about burnout, like, I'm doing ceramics and music and lettering, and like right now I'm kind of like, I think I need to slow down a little bit. So like, I know it can get a bit hectic, but again, it's all just a balance.
I love that. And I would like to open the mic to the people in the room, because I see the chat like going on right now. And I bet that there's some questions that they want to ask you. We actually been discussing a lot around this, like, what are the things that make you unique as a creative, which are, Scott, you were talking about this right now, like all of the things that interest you are, make you, right? And they will very likely influence what you do. If you're interested in ceramics, this would influence your lettering work, and vice versa. So I think that enhancing those aspects of your personality will be definitely positive for your business, or for your exploring your creative skills, right? So I want to open the mic for those in the room that want to make a question. Just raise your hand and I will open the mic for you. So Natalia, go ahead.
So one of the questions I have is, I think actually someone wrote it in the chat, but whenever you find this hobby that becomes your new medium, how do you compensate having other hobbies that have nothing to, like, turning that new hobby into your new medium or job? Like, how do you separate? Because I find that a lot of times as creatives, we find hobbies that actually have a lot to do with our work. So how do you find those boundaries between what is really solely a hobby and you're doing it because you enjoy it, and what you actually find that you can bring to your work? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're asking. It's a tough balance for sure. I'm still so new into ceramics and music that luckily they are still hobbies, and they haven't reached that point of like transitioning into, like a full-time career. So I can't really talk too much about that just because it's still so new for me. But in my opinion, when a hobby starts to make you money and it takes away from your current day-to-day job, that's kind of when you have to realize, like, wait, do I want to make this transition, or do I want to say no to the money and solely do it for the sake of doing it? You know, that I think that's kind of where that distinction happens, is like when there's money involved with your hobby, or like if you can sell this item, if you can like teach a class or something. I don't know whatever the sort of situation is, but once it starts like bringing in income, that's where you have to question like where you want to go from there. So for me, ceramics is like one of those things where I just enjoy doing it, and I have no intention of selling my stuff. I usually just post it on Instagram and say, who wants this? I'm just like, I literally just give it away for free because I don't care to like go through the process of like trying to sell it. But you know, it's a tough balance. I don't know. I'm still so new into it, so I don't know if that necessarily answers your question, but hopefully it does to some degree.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I would like to add something which has to do with kind of like goal and purpose. Like, I feel that, you know, a hobby should allow you to be present in the moment and just do it because it's fun, and you don't have any purpose beyond just doing that exact thing in that exact moment, right? So for when our hobby becomes our job, then we have other pursuits. We want to make money, and we want to be recognized by this, and we want to I don't know, win prizes or whatever your goals, your career goals are. But I think that a hobby, or the definition of a hobby, could be more like something you enjoy doing without any goal in mind, without anything beyond just doing that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's kind of like what I was trying to get at, is like, it's got to just be something you are doing for the sake of like loving the process, and that's it.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm going to pick up on another question. Lindsay, go ahead. Yay.
Okay. I'll add just to that conversation about the hobbies. I think that even if it doesn't have to do with what you're doing with, because you're not like putting all your creative eggs in one basket, it makes you a better designer or a better letterer, or even if it's something that, like, I make jewelry, totally unrelated, because you're not putting your heart and soul into everything and expecting to get it back.
Yeah.
That's not my question. So my question is when you were starting out, where did you see that pivot from like beginner to feeling like expert, or maybe not expert, but like, I know the next client is going to come or going to show up. Like, how did that pivot happen for you?
That's an excellent question. For me personally, with my career, I started when I was a sophomore in college. So, you know, at the time I was probably like 20 or so, maybe 19. So I was pretty early on, and I was doing it, again, like you just said, kind of like a hobby. I was posting it on Instagram, and that was it. I was just doing it for fun. I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed everything about it, while I was simultaneously going through school. And then one day I got a email from TGI Fridays to like work on an ad campaign. And I've never had a client at this point. I was just kind of like, you know, blown away that, you know, somebody would reach out to, you know, want to pay me for the work that I was doing for fun. And when that point happened, that's kind of when I had this sort of like, you know, awakening in a way. At least with my career, that's when I realized, I was like, oh, maybe I could do this full time and, you know, transition into, you know, being a full-time, you know, freelance lettering artist. I never really considered it at the time because I was working at an advertising agency, you know, doing your typical graphic design work. And I didn't think too much of it. I thought, you know, I'm going to work at this agency for the rest of my life and everything's going to be great. And that sort of like initial email is kind of what allowed me to realize, oh, this is serious stuff. And that's kind of when I made this sort of pivot almost to try and portray my work more of a, you know, a skill set rather than a hobby. And you know, it's been going well ever since somehow. But hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, amazing. I'm going to take the next question by Yanni. I'm going to open your mic, Yanni.
Hi. Hola, Scott.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Well,
Nice to see you.
I was writing the question in English because I'm not the best with my English skills, but I'm
That's
trying to
okay.
do my best.
No worries.
Okay, I'm a big fan of your type design work. I think it's awesome, and I consider that your work speaks for you. But what happened when you publish this new and expressive video of you speaking and showing this funny side of you to the world? Some new client or potential collaborator appears because of the videos. This complement your work in some way?
That's a great question. Part of kind of like what happened when I started posting those TikTok videos, of course, in the back of my head, I was like, oh, maybe I'll get some work from this. Maybe a client will see these silly videos and want to work together. I did get 5 to 10 emails of potential clients, but you know how you can weed out a really shitty, scary client from a good one. So I got a lot of shitty, scary emails where I was like, this is not going to work out. It was like somebody was like, I need a logo for $100. And I was like, well, we can't work together. So that was easy to just, pass on that type of work. But I think ultimately the most or the biggest benefit from posting those videos was allowing me to truly be myself, and allowing me to not be so worried about what a client thinks of me, what a friend or somebody else thinks of me. It's just me being my true authentic self, and then allowing that to, of course, be portrayed in the work that I'm presenting. And that's kind of how this, if you see my website now, this is a newer website that I just launched maybe 2 or 3 months ago at this point. And that's kind of how this new website came about. I started posting these TikTok videos and realizing I'm getting in the groove of being me, being true to myself. And that allowed me to realize, wait a second, my work does not correlate with this version that I'm portraying on TikTok. I would like to think that I'm a funny, outgoing, energetic type of person. But my work was or at least the portfolio site design itself and the copywriting and all that stuff was so serious and so business oriented. And so it was so boring. It was the exact opposite of me. And so it was this, again, a kind of an awakening or a light bulb moment. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to be my true authentic version of myself, even on my portfolio site. So if somebody comes to my site, they say, I want to work with Scott solely because of his personality, not so much his work. The work's an added benefit, but because when you're working with a client, you're creating a relationship with that individual. And it's not so much here's money, give me lettering. It's more of hey, let's talk, let's be friends, let's establish a relationship, let's hang out. I would rather establish that kind of relationship as opposed to just a simple business transaction. And so I think that's where your personality and putting all of yourself into whatever it is that you're doing, ultimately will be a benefit in the long run, because you'll get projects and inquiries that you truly give a shit about and that are super fun to take on. And the relationship back and forth is super, engaging and enjoyable ultimately, because I take Zoom calls similar to this with clients and I can be cracking jokes and stuff. And if the other person's not reciprocating, it's not ideal to have that type of relationship. You want something that's gonna work both ways. And that's where, again, to answer your question, portraying this version of myself on TikTok was honestly the best thing that ever happened to me, because it was this self-reflectant moment and realization. So I highly recommend everybody get on TikTok and post some silly videos. And I'm just kidding. Do whatever makes sense for you, of course.
I love that, because also we've been discussing, or conversations have been circling around this exact same topic throughout this retreat. How the person you are has an impact on who you work with, the work you do. And I feel that as creatives or as illustrators or designers, we have bought into the idea of like, and I think I even wrote this in one of my books, that the work should speak for itself. And we have been hiding behind our work for so long. We think that our work is us, and actually we are the core of our work. And the more the more we start showing up and kind of explaining the reasons why we create the work we do, telling the stories that led us to create the work we do, then our work becomes a lot more richer and a lot more interesting, just because it's coming from you, right? Yeah. And I can totally resonate with what you were just saying about like showing yourself the way you are, because you will also connect more with the people you like hanging out with and working for. And I've seen in your website that you have, which I don't see often on designers' website, you have your value statement. You have your values right there. And I thought that was so great. Like, I often go onto designers or illustrators' websites just because, it's like you look at work that you like to look at, and that is similar to yours and to the discipline you're working in. And I always go to the about page, and I found so many websites with like no picture whatsoever. Just a line like saying this, I'm a designer working for companies and brands, which is like, who are you? Like, what's your story? Right. Like, tell me more. And I thought it was so, your website not only gives you an idea of the work you're capable of doing, but also of which kind of person is behind and in the forefront of the business, right? So,
right. I'm glad you noticed. Thank you. I've been doing, like I said, a lot of like self-reflectant. Like I've been going to therapy for the past 2 or 3 years and working on myself, and through that process too. One of the things we sort of like realized, or at least that I realized I needed to do, is sort of like define my values, because that will ultimately, especially in a business relationship, it makes so much sense to make sure you're working with people that all ultimately align with your values, because again, it's going to make the business relationship that much better. So I just wanted to put it front and center and make sure clients are, ideally, if they do come across my website and read that they are also aligning with these things. And if they don't align with my values in some way, then, hit the rocks, I guess, or kick rocks, or whatever the phrase is. I don't want to work with somebody that I don't, 100% agree with in a lot of different ways, especially in, at least those that are listed on my website are like my top 6 values. And that's kind of what my therapist and I were working on, is like, okay, define those top 6 values and, apply that to the rest of your life. And I've, tried to apply that in everything that I do going forward. And it's been, a game changer, especially in the business sense. So I highly recommend doing that too. Like if you guys haven't done so, like take the time to sort of do some self-reflecting work and, question, like ask yourself, what are my values? Like, what do I give a shit about? What are the things that like allow me to get up in the morning and go through my day to day. That kind of stuff's important. And, I wasn't considering it prior to therapy because I, just wasn't aware of it. So highly recommend.
So good, because you're validating a lot of the work we have been doing so far in this retreat, which was like exactly this, like really going through our values and like our purpose statement and like the things that make us unique as creatives. So I love everything that you're saying right now. I'm going to take just one more question, and and then we are going to move on to the next segment of the show.
Talking about your TikToks and your feelings you had with them, do you think you struggled with burnout because you couldn't be yourself at work before, and that was kind of freeing your mind, or
Yeah.
being more you and put this into your work afterwards, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, for some reason, I think Martina kind of touched on this too, is like I felt like at least as designers, we're trying to portray a certain version of ourselves to clients. And for the longest time, I was always like very business focused, very much like, here's my work, here's what I do. I'm very skilled in what I do, X, Y, and Z, you know, and you list all your credentials. But I felt like there was a part of myself that I was like hiding from the world almost. You know, even on Instagram, I don't portray the same version that I would like to, or at least I've been trying to work on that, at least on Instagram. But previously, like I wouldn't share my face at all. I would just post the work, say, you know, in the captions, I'd say, this is the work that I did. Here's the client, X, Y, and Z, whatever. And now I'm trying to be like, here's, you know, I'm trying to be a bit more spontaneous and fun and organic and myself, you know, at the end of the day. And I want to make sure clients can see that, especially through my social channels, through my website, through everything. But it ultimately helps me sort of develop these better relationships with clients after they can see, you know, this true, authentic Scott, and ideally want to hire this version of myself because they know that it would be a fun relationship to have, as opposed to, you know, let's get straight to business. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay,
Thank
cool.
you.
Yes.
Yeah, and I want to add something to that before we move on to the next segment, which is like, Scott, we were discussing about this topic before in the retreat, and we were also mentioning that, you know, we spend hours of our day working, so it makes a lot of sense to integrate our personality, our life, the things we like, into something that takes up most of our day, or my day, your day. So I think what you are saying of, you know, integrating the way you are, being more open about who you are, your personality, makes a lot of sense, because, you know, you will be spending a lot of time doing the work you do and working in client assignments and doing personal work. So it makes a lot of sense that it brings you joy. It makes you feel good about yourself. It's aligned with who you are, and you're not playing a part when you hit the studio and then you leave the studio and you're like another person, right? So
Yeah, 100%. It just like removes that layer of like having to, you know, put on a show almost. You can just be yourself 100% of the time, as opposed to clocking in and clocking out, like you were just saying.
I love that. So we're gonna move on to our next segment, which is the Better Now segment, where we share something we are happy about or something that has impacted our lives lately. Scott, you shared a lot about your last creative endeavors, but I want to hear more about, you know, some project that made you happy lately, or something personal that you want to highlight.
Oh boy. I mean, we've kind of touched on this. I think, you know, the one thing that's making me happy right now is exploring music. I've been really enjoying the process. I just finished my first like music foundations class at the Berklee College of Music. So, you know, I went into it knowing absolutely nothing, and now I can read and write music. You know, not very well, but I can do, you know, some basic stuff. So, you know, as soon as I finished that, like our last homework assignment was writing an 8-bar chord progression. And to me, that was like daunting as hell. And I did it. And, you know, I felt this like huge, of course, sense of accomplishment. And I was so proud of myself. And, you know, just the fact that I went through all of that. So I'm like stoked on my journey and excited to continue and see what happens next. Cause I don't know. It's just it's all a journey right now.
Amazing. Are you going to share some of that on social media?
At some point, maybe. You know, right now, again, it's still kind of a hobby. I'd be so nervous to share music right now, but maybe in like, give me like 3 or 4 years.
Exciting. I love that. I will share that really this makes me happy. Like this retreat we are hosting and having you, Scott, in the retreat and also recording a podcast episode makes me happy. I love like everything you have shared today with us, all the stories. I love that I get to, be part of the journey of all the people here in the room. These are freelancers and aspiring freelancers that are launching their freelance business or are, pivoting their career focus. And I know that because I can help only a certain amount of people, there are some people that were left behind or left out of this program. But I'm so happy to have, put together this amazing group of people that are really open with each other, are really helping each other, and have created a small community that is supporting one another. And I love that, I get to create that space for them. So I'm celebrating that with you today.
Yeah.
So Scott, this is the end of our show. It was so great to have you here, really, and all the things you have shared with us. So where can people find you?
You can find me online everywhere at You Bring Fire. My website is also youbringfire.com. And that's pretty much it.
Amazing. I'm going to add all of these things to the show notes. And is there any last thoughts you would like to share before we go?
Yeah, I was going to say, if anyone has any questions about anything else, like I know we only have an hour here to chat, but if you guys need any guidance or have questions about anything in particular, feel free to reach out. I'm always open and willing to share my thoughts and opinions or feedback or whatever you may need. Feel free to email me. I don't mind.
Amazing. So thank you so much, Scott, again.
Of course, thank you.
This is it. You can find me, the host of the show, on social networks at Martina Flor on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you have a question or comments, you can go to martinaflor.com/podcast, where you can see previous episodes, find show notes, and send voice memos with your comments and questions. You can also watch these episodes on YouTube. Just go to martinaflor.com/YouTube to find them. You can, of course, listen to all of our episodes on your favorite podcast platform. So this is it for today. If you love this episode, subscribe to this podcast. And if you leave us a review, it will help others find us. Thank you all for listening. Thank you everyone in the room in the retreat. Thank you, Scott, for being there. And see you in the next episode of Letter Now. Bye-bye.
This podcast is awesome.